the concept of being a human being is thrown into question. What is a human being? Nietzsche was famous for saying, without God, there's no such thing as being. There's no being. Everything is becoming. Everything is in flux. There's nothing stable. Now it has to be achieved in some way. And through power, through whatever. And so there is no human equality to speak of. Because human equality, that moral equality, requires something stable, some kind of fixed thing across all of humanity. But if God goes out the window, the death of God really brings in the death of the human.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Union Podcast. My name is Brian Pugh, and this is my beautiful wife, Bonnie Pugh.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As the wind just blows through your hair. Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like
maybe she's born with it. Too much. Okay. Anyways, this is episode 113, and we are so excited to have Steve Kim from Apologetics Canada on this episode. We absolutely love AC, love what they're doing, and you may be tracking along with all the growth and impact that they're having through Wes Huff and a lot of the podcasts he's been on, kind of giving a very clear argument and trustworthy declaration of the trustworthiness of Scripture and the authenticity of what we have within the Scriptures. And so it's been so exciting to see what God's been doing through their ministry. But also, like, we just love them as people, and we're grateful to be adjunct speakers with them, be part of the team that way. But man, we jump into it with Steve. We hear some of his own testimony. We're going to talk about abortion. We're going to talk about transhumanism. We're going to talk about the Imago Dei. Like, what stood out to you in the conversation?
I mean, well, something I would say just about Steve in general is that it's wild to, you'll hear in his story, it's wild to hear his origin and then to see just such a soft heart to the Lord for people. But it's like it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And I just see him as somebody who doesn't just think about these theological, philosophical themes as a matter of intellect, but about how to take the intellect and serve people with it. And so I think I'm excited not just for the content, but for the tone in which he brings it all. So,
and Steve is super smart but super humble, as is the kind of MO at Apologetics Canada. Yeah. But Steve is in the middle of working on his doctorate through the University of Highlands and Islands. Yeah, something like that in Scotland. So. Yeah. We're just so honored for his expertise on these topics of transhumanism and kind of the philosophy behind a lot of these things. But before we jump to the conversation at the Union, we are all about helping people find wholeness in a gospel-centered approach to these topics of sexuality, identity, and relationships. So if you found value in what we're doing here, the work at the Union, we would love it if you would share this podcast, if you would get it out to your friends, subscribe, comment, even if you want to give to partner to the furthering of the work of the Union to help more people encounter the beauty of God's design, find healing and redemption for when that design for sexuality and identity has been compromised and there's been a break there. Yeah. We would absolutely love it. You can go to our website, theunionmovement.com/partner, and you can give to helping people find that wholeness that Jesus brings to our lives. And but we would love it. You comment, subscribe, all those kind of things. Share this podcast, get it out in front of more and more people, as we want to make a big deal. We just want to get the news out because it's already a big deal. The gospel. Yeah, the gospel is already a big deal.
And I was just talking to someone yesterday about that verse where it says, like, it's the power of God unto salvation. Like, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power unto salvation. And we think of that sometimes as the salvation as like the moment of, okay, now when you die, you get to go to heaven. Like, I am saved. But what we were talking about is the redeeming work of the gospel in our everyday life, where the trajectory, even what we're starting to see is like family lineage, where it's like, oh, we were on like the crash course direction over here to like, just destruction. And God steps in and literally just retrieves them from that pit. Yeah. And now it's the trajectory of that whole family line is changed. Yeah. That's the power of the gospel. to salvation for the whole family.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. For the
For
whole
all
household.
those who would trust in him, for all those who would put their hope in his name.
Yeah.
This is the reality. And so in light of that, we are excited to throw it to our conversation with Steve Kim as we talk about abortion, transhumanism, and the Imago Dei. It's such a great conversation. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Union Movement Podcast. The Union Movement exists to help people find wholeness in sexuality, identity, and relationships with a gospel-centered and holistic approach. We hope and pray that this podcast episode is enriching in your life and helps you to see the beauty of God's design for all of these areas. Please enjoy today's episode. All right, everybody, welcome to the Union Podcast. We are super excited today. We got a special guest, one of our favorite people in the world. We have Steve Kim from Apologetics Canada. Steve Kim, welcome to the Union Podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this all week. So thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Same here. It's an honor for us that you would take time. We so appreciate our relationship with you and the rest of the team at Apologetics Canada. We feel like we kind of feel like AC is kind of like a big brother that we're aspiring to be like when we grow up, when we get bigger, when we graduate, or I don't know, whatever the goal
Feels like
would be.
there's like a kindred spirit situation with you guys. So.
And from my vantage point, like I've always really appreciated the work that you guys have been doing. It feels such a need in our culture right now, and I don't think we really appreciate what it is we're missing out on when we are not doing marriage and family and sex and sexuality well. So just thank you guys for doing all that work that the culture desperately needs.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Yeah. And again, like through our relationship being adjunct speakers with you guys, it's been so cool to kind of watch how God has really expanded your ministry and brought, I had the chance to have coffee with Andy, I think a couple of weeks back, and we were talking about how, God's really brought a lot of exposure through Wes's influence and given Wes some platforms and different podcasts and just opportunities to do what God's graced him with. But how Andy was talking about, like, we were busy before all that happened. You know what I mean? And so
yes.
How has that been, like, navigating that growth and that opportunity that you guys have and trying to steward that well?
Yeah, I guess we've always been busy, but now with the growth of the team and we're looking at expanding our ministry to another country, it feels a little different in that whereas before we had a set number of things that we spent a lot of time getting done, now it seems like I'm being pulled in a million different directions. And I'm just the Alberta director. I mean, I can only imagine what Andy as the president must have been going through, because he has to make so many decisions for so many things. And
I believe it.
But at the same time, the team has grown. And so the workload, has been distributed. We just hired another staff member who is now going to take a lot of the take really charge of day-to-day operations. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to kind of keep our heads above water and do ministry more effectively. But it's all good growth pains. We take it. It's been really good.
Love it.
That's amazing. I mean, just this morning I said to one of my boys, and I don't know, as a parent, you might do this too, where sometimes you look at your kids and you go, I think you grew last night. Like, how did you get so tall? And just as you're saying, they're like growing pains and growth spurts, I think that's a reality within ministry. And, every once in a while, it's just like, it feels overnight, even though it's like there's been consistent growth for a long time. But yeah, it really has been a joy to get to know you guys. And as we've gotten to know you even personally, starting to learn more about your story. We love the theological conversations, but also we love that God often will use what has happened in our personal lives to shape the direction of either study or passion.
Sure.
Could you just share with us, we know some of the details, but share with us how your story led you to where you are. Starting from even when you were young.
Yeah, young is a bit of an understatement, right? I mean, you guys know my story a little bit, but my life almost didn't happen. Let's just put it that way. So I'm the youngest of three. I have an older sister, older brother, and I'm the third in line. And when I was conceived, my mother didn't want a third one. So she chose to go to a nearby clinic to have me aborted. Now, in Korea, this is there is a particular expression when they talk about abortion, and they talk about erasing the kid. And so my mom sought to do that for various reasons. She had her reasons, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, about our reconciliation later. But so she went, and thanks be to God, that clinic was only equipped to handle first trimester abortions, and I was already in my second trimester, so she was turned away. And later, she kind of took matters into her own hands, but God preserved me all throughout that. And what saved my life, what was pivotal in all of that, was my dad. He found out. And when he found out, he literally threatened her. If you go through with this, I will turn you into the police for murder. And that's what got her to stop. And so imagine now looking back and then looking at the kind of talking points that people bring up, and especially when some very pro-choice friends start saying things like, no uterus, no opinion. Right. I get a little bit irked. Do I get a say in this? Because my life almost ended. And the reason I'm here today is because a man spoke up. My dad spoke up for me. And so does he get a say? Do I get a say? Because that literally almost took my life. And so, so that's how my life started. It was a little shaky, shall we say, but and so that's why even today, abortion is a very personal topic to me. And my wife also worked for a provincial pro-life organization for some time here, and I can tell you that when she was doing that, I mean, she was doing administrative work, not necessarily like direct frontline people-to-people kind of work. But even then, I felt very much like she was fighting for me. So, so I look at it very differently.
Sure. How old were you when you found out about your origin story?
Yeah, I think I was about 9 or 10. When I started hearing bits and pieces. Now, for various life circumstances, I didn't really grow up with my mom. So she was, I think it's fair to say that she was almost removed from my life when I was just a year old. And it wasn't until after my father passed away when I was 16, that's when she actually came back into my life. So my siblings and I, we lived with her under the same roof kind of thing for the first time. I did see her on occasion here and there. And I remember how emotional she was for her to sit down and have dinner together. And so it was a bit of a conflicted sort of a thing, mixed signals, because on the one hand, I was hearing about the kinds of things that she tried to do. But on the other hand, I could see how thankful she was that she got to spend some time with us on those rare occasions. Wow. And so, that was all very interesting. I started hearing it probably around 9 and 10.
Wow. My goodness. What was that like being so young and hearing some of that? And
Yeah.
Like what type of deeper questions did that start to bring up in your own heart around who you were, your value, worth, all those kinds of things?
I don't think I had a sort of conscious appreciation of the gravity of what almost took place until later. I was probably in my late teens when I started, as with many people, I was kind of wrestling with self-doubt and trying to figure out who I was, and just all part of the formation process. But I was very much kind of feeling like I was unlovable and all that. And that carried on very much into my 20s. It wasn't until I finally started taking some counseling that this pattern started emerging, where in my life there was a lot of this sort of abandonment by especially female figures in my life.
Wow.
Even things like, there were times when my sister was very much absent, again, for various reasons, not necessarily her fault. And, story with my mother. And after my father passed away, my stepmother, she just couldn't do life here in Canada with 3 kids, barely speaking the language. And so she decided to head back to Korea. And now this stepmother is the one that I grew up with. And so she left. So a lot of those things. And I think that kind of abandonment issue really kind of manifested in the way I was relating to women, for example. And I could easily get overly attached. And a lot of that was rooted in this sense that I was unlovable because so many people kind of left me. And it took a long time for me to work through all of that. And,
of course.
And it was a very different turn of events when I started seeing my now wife, Sharina, and just her level of commitment to me changed a lot of that.
Yeah. Wow. Could you speak to, because obviously, we fast forward a little bit, you've been able to find a certain level of reconciliation and, extend forgiveness to your mom. And what did that process look like? And how did you even approach that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a very explicit kind of reconciliation where I say, Mom, I forgive you, or my mom asking me to forgive her, nothing like that. And part of that is because, we come from South Korea. We have this honor shame culture kind of thing. So there are some things that we're not going to confront very directly, but it does come out in the way that we behave around each other, right? So for example, if my dad ever got angry with me, and it wasn't necessarily warranted, and he wanted to apologize, he never said sorry. It was just not a thing. Our dads never said sorry. It just didn't happen. But what he did do was he would, take me out for a really yummy snack out of nowhere kind of thing.
Right.
And I knew it was as clear as him saying, I'm so sorry I did that, when he did that to me kind of. So it was a little bit like that with my mother too. There were occasions when these things were kind of brought up as like a passing mention. And it's the cues. It's always indirect communication. And I remember one time I did tell her a number of years ago when she came to visit me here in Alberta. So, she's getting on in years, and I'm a grown man now too. But I shared with her what really helped me heal. And that was when my friend that I went to Bible college with, I swear she missed her life's calling. Like, she should have been a counselor. But what she brought up, Andrea is her name. Shout out to you if you're listening to this. Andrea told me, she didn't know you at the time. And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? That's true. What she hadn't really formed a bond with me as me. What she saw was her circumstances around her. What she saw was the pressure of life. What she saw was not yet a son, but it was just something standing in her way, kind of a thing. And that actually made a lot of sense of our interaction later. That kind of confused me, where, she just, was all in tears to be able to sit down with the three of us for a meal because she hadn't seen us for a long time, that sort of thing. And later, just our interaction later as we started living together and just her tender care towards me. And I remember there was one time when I was really having a hard time with mental health and things like that. And just one morning, she just came to me, gave me a hug, and she was all in tears. She would never do something like that. It's just not part of the culture. And there she was, right? She gave me a big hug and she was just crying. And so that kind of tenderness, now it kind of, that explained a lot of things. And so I just kind of shared that with her at some point. Like, that really helped me heal, to hear that, it wasn't me, so to speak, that you were trying to erase, but you were just dealing with a lot of stuff at the time. And so that also helped me have a lot of compassion for her, knowing that she was in such dire straits at the time.
Of course.
So I think that helped reconcile. Again, it's not the sort of thing that we would explicitly talk about, but a lot of indirect communications. And I think, I'm glad to say, I think for me, it's behind us now when it comes to, like, I don't hold it against her. And she doesn't necessarily feel burdened by it anymore, which I'm thankful for. Yeah.
Wow.
That's really powerful. I'm just imagining there's going to be listeners or people watching this who could resonate with an aspect of what you're saying. And I think, their story might be different, but I hope that they can even just hear your tone of voice for you to say, like, I have compassion for the person that once tried to erase me.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is evidence of the love of God being poured out in your heart, that you're able to love even the one that didn't make space or didn't want space for you, And so, if anyone's listening right now, just pray that that's healing to your soul too.
Totally.
That God preserved your life, and that you are, you're made in his image and here for a reason, even if somebody else didn't see that reason.
Yeah.
So
you said something there, Steve, that I thought was really interesting, and even that comment that your friend Andrea made of, like, she didn't know who you were. Like, she didn't know the legend that was inside of her womb. You know what I mean?
You're too kind.
Yeah. But I think even some of the language that's used in culture, does kind of like start to devalue, so that, like, we don't think of this being as a human being. It's more just, we hear a lot of the clump of cells kind of talk, like, well, it's not really a person. And so, like, there is this tendency within at least modern culture to dehumanize a baby in the womb, to just use, and there's, again, we could get in a long list of all the language that's shifted in order to kind of protect this dynamic. But how does some of these perspectives contrast deeply, like, with the Christian worldview around what it means to be human? Because from a Christian perspective, we wouldn't say that, like, this is just a clump of cells. So, like, how do you approach that topic?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I'll share this one phrase of all the dehumanizing phrases. This one really irked me, bothered me. So my wife, for a time, she was studying midwifery at UBC. She never finished the program for various reasons. It was just not a good place for her. But in the midwifery program, she would tell me they often use the term the product of conception. It's a product of conception.
Wow.
So that kind of drove me off the wall. I'm just like, man, but I gotta give them credit. Like that's really creative in a twisted sense. But yeah, how does the Christian worldview differ in this regard? I remember Nancy Pearcey once coming to our conference, and she made the comment that the pro-life view actually is more inclusive than the pro-choice view. Because according to the pro-choice view, your membership as a member of the moral human community has to be earned and achieved, whether it's by having a heartbeat or by achieving brain waves or self-awareness, whatever it is, it has to be achieved. Now, in the pro-life community, we're more inclusive in the sense that if you're conceived, just by virtue of you being human, you're in. You're now a member of the moral community.
Yeah.
And I think pro-life community, even there, because there are lots of like secular pro-lifers. In fact, I do enjoy reading stuff and watching stuff from secular pro-life. I find that very helpful. But I do find that even there, it kind of, there's something missing there. Because the question is, okay, what do you ground your human worth on? That inherent human value, what are you going to place it on? In the Christian community, the source of your human worth and value is not what you achieve. It's not just what's given to you by some kind of human fiat, let it be. We'll just say that you being human gives you value. But the Christian worldview, but the Christian worldview says, no, your source of your intrinsic worth comes from something outside of humanity. So you can't change it and you can't take it away because no human person ever gave it to you. And the source is God saying, you are now made in my image, right? You are my viceroys on this earth. You are my representatives. To use this metaphor, you look like me, right? And I think that doctrine of Imago Dei, that image of God, the idea that we're all made in God's image, has this radical effect of equalizing everyone.
Yeah.
Because it's not earned, it's not achieved, it's just given to you. You just have it, and the source is outside of us. And so nobody can, other than the Creator himself, nobody can just take it away or give it to you. It's not that sort of a thing. So that doctrine of Imago Dei. And why is the image so important? Because what you do with an image of someone says a lot about your attitude to that person or that which,
right.
Is the source of that image. So imagine if I were to come home and I see my daughter with this picture of this boy up on her wall, and she's like constantly stabbing it with a pencil, right? I would look at that and I go, I wouldn't take that as a morally neutral act. I'm just like, okay, first of all, sweetie, who is this and where can I find him so I can break his legs? But after that, okay, what happened, right? What happened? Right. Why are you... I wouldn't look at that and go, she's mad at the image, right? I look at that and go, you're mad at him. What did he do to you? It reveals her heart disposition towards that person, and this is made in his image, right? So what we do to one another then reveals what our relationship is like between us and God. So I think that's why the image is very valuable.
That sounds a lot like 1 John to me. Like you can't say that you love God and then hate your brothers.
Right. Exactly.
Like, that's the concept that you're saying. Yeah, that's very interesting. So then if we have an issue or like we're kind of like trying to, I mean, go bigger into, okay, so we've talked about abortion, think about issues of euthanasia, or in Canada, like the MAID program. And again, the terminologies to try to soften the reality of what's happening.
Yeah. We don't call it abortion. We call it reproductive health. Because like who wants to be against health? You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like,
we don't want to be reproductively unhealthy.
Exactly. No, exactly. So
And notice even that phrase reproductive health removes the child from it, right? It's all about the mother.
Right.
And all of a sudden but if you actually look at the kinds of things that some pro-choicers say to other people, it's clear that they don't think of it as reproductive health, because I know of pro-life advocates who get something of threats from some pro-choicers, not all of them, but some of them would say, oh, you should have been aborted when you were a child, kind of a thing. At that point, you have to ask, okay, are you wishing reproductive health on me? Are you wishing healthcare on me? What is it that you're actually saying when you're saying you should have been aborted? What you're saying is you should have been killed. You should have been dead. So, okay, is that healthcare? Okay, again, that's just a whole other can of worms. But
no, for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. Throughout this conversation, we were wanting to kind of zoom in on the aspects of transhumanism, which abortion is directly connected to, but some of our listeners would not be necessarily familiar with this term transhumanism. They could hear trans, well, is this about just transgender ideology, or what is this about? But like, can you unpack to us in like just kind of everyday language, like what transhumanism, what it means and kind of its origins and things like that?
Yeah. Transhumanism literally means beyond human. And so you can kind of get a sense that transgenderism now means beyond gender. So that's why you hear some of these LGBTQ advocates saying things like gender is over, you know. But transhumanism, it depends on how you define it. So a lot of advocates of transhumanism would say, well, let's use technology to improve human lives. Now, if you define it that way, there's nothing troubling about that, because we do this all the time, right?
Sure.
I'm wearing glasses because of my poor vision, right? I'm wearing clothes. We're using this to do this, you know, across 2 provinces. You know, we use technology all the time.
Yeah.
But what's troubling about transhumanism is that they take the next step and say, well, let's merge with technology to the point where, and in the process, if we cease to be human, then so be it, right? So the idea is evolution isn't finished. We are not the apex of evolution. But what we can do from here on is, whereas in the past we relied on natural selection acting on random mutation, now we can use technology to intelligently guide evolution from here on. So it's not natural selection anymore. It's rational selection. Let's pick and choose where we're going to go. And so that's where you start getting things like, okay, using genetic engineering like CRISPR-Cas9, or brain-computer interface, or nanotechnology, whatever it might be, right? Now we can merge with technology. And now we're seeing that sort of trajectory more and more. Now, I don't think anybody is... transhumanism is a movement, so it's not just one person with a particular agenda pushing this. Although the word transhumanism is becoming more mainstream than before, thanks to groups like the World Economics Forum, where they will openly talk about the future state of human beings. Like historian Yuval Noah Harari, that Israeli historian, he wrote a book called Homo Deus, where he talks about, this is going to happen. And those who don't enhance themselves with technology, you will fall behind and you will become obsolete. And he says it very matter-of-factly. And so... it depends on how you define it, but the troubling part is, let's merge with technology, and if in the process we cease to remain human and we become something better than human, so be it.
Right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on like what the lines are with technology, and like you even say like glasses and things like that. It was I was listening to a presentation by Carl Truman where he was kind of weighing in on some of this, but where he said like there's a line where the technology allows us to be more human. You know what I mean? So like if say there's a soldier goes off to war, loses a leg, well, technology allows him to still have two legs. You know what I mean? Like you could have
function
an
as
artificial limb that way, but it would be immoral or unethical or however you want to look at it, I guess. But like for him to now have three legs, you know what I mean? Like that technology is not allowing him to be more human. It's allowing him to be beyond human, beyond that the way he was designed. So like how do you help people like maybe grasp the nuance there and understand that line?
So what you're touching on is perhaps one of the most central discussions that's taking place in transhumanism is what's the line between therapy and enhancement. So therapy just being fixing what's broken. Enhancement is understood to be the sort of taking what's perfectly well and normal and making it better. So imagine, with my eyesight, I have poor vision, so I could get LASIK eye surgery to correct it, right? But what if my eyes were perfectly healthy, but I opted for some kind of surgery to make my visual acuity match that of, say, a bald eagle, that sort of thing. So the tricky part is that while there are some very clear cases of therapy versus enhancement, there are also very tricky middle ground. So think vaccination, for example. Now, it doesn't matter what else you think about it. Think about the concept of vaccination.
Didn't know we were going there. Okay. That's good. It's good.
What is it supposed to do? Well, it's supposed to boost your immune system to prevent some potential future disease, right? So is it enhancement or is it therapy?
Because it's preventative of a thing that could require therapy. So interesting.
Yeah, but you do that by way of enhancing what's operating kind of normally in a sense. What about going back to your illustration, Brian? Say a war veteran, he loses his legs. So then he gets prosthetic legs. And now as a result, let's say these are very advanced prosthetic legs. And so now he can run faster and jump higher, almost like this Bionic Man kind of a scenario. Is that therapy or enhancement? Well, it seems to be both. It had a therapeutic purpose, but in the process, it also enhanced him.
Right.
So there are these kind of tricky middle grounds. And so a lot of transhumanists would then say, well, therapy and enhancement, it's just sitting on a spectrum, right? It's not two separate categories. It's just one category, and it depends on just how far you go one way or the other. It's a spectrum. Yeah. Everybody loves a spectrum these days. Yeah. Everybody's trying to move away from binaries or whatever it might be. Everybody wants to put it on a spectrum. But of course, the challenge to that, my challenge to that would be, well, keep exceptional cases exceptional, right? Exceptions prove the rule. Just because there are gray cases in between doesn't mean that there isn't a clear difference between enhancement and therapy. There are clear cases. So the distinction does matter. So let me give you this illustration. I mean, Brian, you and me, we have a little bit of facial hair, but let's say to Bonnie's horror, you decided to shave everything one day, right? And you're starting over. Have you seen one of those like reels where all these girlfriends are reacting to their boyfriends as completely being clean shaven?
Oh, yeah.
And anyway,
or children who see their dad with no mustache for the first time and they're like panicking. They don't recognize their own father. Yeah.
I don't know you.
Yeah.
But let's say Brian decided to start over, so he's clean shaven. Now, here's the challenge for you, Bonnie. At what point do you say that he has a beard? Right? Is it when he has 10 strands of facial hair? 20?
5 o'clock shadow.
21?
Yeah.
5 o'clock shadow. Yeah, exactly. At what point do you say that he has a beard? Well, it's virtually impossible to say. Right? How many strands? How long? So it's a very graded sort of a thing. But at the same time, it would be almost absurd to say that you don't know the difference, therefore, between him being clean shaven and him having a beard.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In the same way, just because between therapy and enhancement there is this tricky middle ground doesn't mean that there isn't a clear difference between enhancement and therapies. So we can't just say, like anything goes, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Just a little tip for all the guys out there in shaving. I've now learned to never go down completely to the skin because Bonnie wants nothing to do with me for like the next 3 days. You know what I mean? 'Cause, like everything starts to get so pokey and everything like that. It's like
an
I can't get a kiss, you know what I mean?
Man, it's like exfoliation for the female. Ow.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's a little bit of a commercial break there. But
man, I feel like there's so many pieces of this where I'm going, as humans, we're kind of addicted to enhancement.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about right now the trend of lip fillers for women, and like, okay, I'm getting older. So then the trends is like, try not to look older. Try to, and then I'm going, okay, well, I am for sure adding greens to my smoothies lately because I'm thinking about health more often. I'm protein all over the place. Like we're all thinking about strength and enhancement. So, but it's health, but it's also maybe vanity, and it's also maybe like a power grab, or it's you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hopefully our listeners are not getting the impression that I'm against enhancement, because we all enhance our lives and enhance ourselves in one way or another, right? When we attend school, we're enhancing ourselves. When we exercise, we're literally reshaping our bodies by tearing our muscles and letting them heal. We're managing the chemical compositions in our body by choosing to eat certain things and not other things. So, and a lot of these are uncontroversial. So hopefully I'm not coming across as enhancement bad. I'm not saying that, but I am cautioning against this idea that there isn't a difference between fixing what's broken and enhancing ourselves. And I think it also matters how we enhance ourselves.
Yes.
Right. There is a difference between, so in transhumanism, oddly enough, the discussion of sports comes up a lot because sports is where we really have to wrestle with, okay, how much of this is your achievement? Because some of it depends on the gear that you use. Right. So say a cyclist, how much of that is you and how much of that is the bicycle that you're using? Those kinds of things. So this discussion comes up a lot. But I think there is a real point at which you say, okay, this is not much of an achievement anymore. So I think there's a difference between, for example, me learning to play a violin through practice and actually achieving that versus me just kind of like almost like this Matrix scenario, right? You remember that scene where Neo gets this downloaded and all of a sudden he says, I know Kung Fu, that sort of thing. What if I could just download that kind of a thing? So now I can just play violin like a virtuoso. There's a real difference, I think.
Interesting. So in some ways it's like so we need to kind of define what is a God-initiated, what are the God-initiated aspects of human existence? And I think one of them would be struggle. And if we eliminate the struggle, we are kind of bypassing the actual development of the human. Would that be accurate, do you think?
Yeah, I think there is something very important to that, because in transhumanist literature, a lot of people, just the kind of basic impulse of it is, let's eradicate suffering, or let's eradicate it as much as is possible. And it has that kind of a utopic kind of a drive to it, right? Even though transhumanists themselves will claim we're not trying to create heaven on earth, but their entire movement is kind of oriented towards that. That's where it's facing. Even if you don't achieve that ideal, that's where you want to head. Because there is a real intolerance, I think, in transhumanism for, broadly speaking, there is a real intolerance for imperfection, or whatever is perceived to be imperfect. And so that would include suffering. Suffering is often seen to be something undesirable. And if there's suffering in your life, it's almost imperfect. And this is where Friedrich Nietzsche, he's one of the guys that I'm studying for this project right now, research project. And he actually chastised Christians for wanting to eliminate suffering. He was reacting to a certain version of Christianity, because as Christians, we understand all too well that, yeah, suffering has a real place in human life, at least on this side of existence. And so he actually really, so he would, if he had been living in our day today, he would have probably chastised transhumanists for wanting to eradicate suffering. He was all about suffering. He was almost too for suffering. Because that's how you grow. That's how you become stronger. That's how you overcome, and your power grows, and all that sort of thing. But yeah, that drive to eradicate suffering, I think, is very problematic, because how much of what we value as human beings comes by way of suffering, right? We cherish things like charity, mercy, helping one another, right? Yeah. Empathy, sympathy, and a lot of these things are just not possible without some degree of suffering.
Right.
A sense of community, even, it has a certain amount of suffering that it sits on. Why do we need community?
Right.
Because at some level there is some kind of suffering that we're trying to work against, but we do that as a community together. And when we are suffering, we can share that pain with one another, and it forms a bond, and so on.
Wow.
Very good. Very interesting.
A lot of people, or maybe some people, might be familiar with Nietzsche's kind of famous comment, like, God's dead and we've killed him. But it does seem that in the transhumanism perspective, there is that sense that, like, God's dead, but we've almost like resurrected him in ourself. Like, we've become God now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say this before too, and this may be a separate kind of tangent, but this is how my brain works sometimes, so just bear with me. But like,
no worries.
But like, even to think about, like, Harari was quoted as saying, is like, what do you do with some of these people who don't take the genetic enhancement, or like kind of go down this road? And he was like boldly enough to say, like, yeah, well, right now we're giving them drugs and video games until we figure out kind of what to do with them. Right. Like, we think like this whole motivation is like so noble, and like for really like true human flourishing of all people, it's like, it doesn't really have that tone. You know what I mean? But so like, how, like, what does that start to look like when, as Nietzsche said, like we kill God, in the sense of like philosophically, and like in our own hearts, we step out of his leadership and authority. He no longer gets to rule and reign, and we rebel against him. How does that start to show up within culture? And is that really what's feeding some of this transhumanism debate and ideology?
Yeah, that is very interesting. It's very interesting. You said almost we're trying to put God in us, like we become gods. very interesting on two counts because Yuval Noah Harari, his book is named Homo Deus.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
So almost like this deified man, deified human through technological advances and merging with technology. And he's a very blunt figure. He would say, well, human rights, it's a fiction. It's a story that we tell ourselves. It's a comforting story, but it's a story nonetheless. Because if you cut up, and cut open a person, where will you find human rights? Nowhere, right? So it's a fiction that we created for ourselves. And interestingly enough, he's not the only one who would talk like that. I mean, there are other writers like Ruth Macklin or that famous Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker. They would say, that Ruth Macklin, I think, wrote an article named "Dignity is a Useless Concept," and then Steven Pinker wrote, it's a really kind of, he's got choice words for it. It's like the stupidity of human dignity, that sort of thing, and they outright reject it. And interestingly enough, Nietzsche said very much the same thing, and he was living, and he passed away in 1900. So he kind of lived through the latter part of the 19th century there. And in that very parable of the madmen, where Nietzsche's madman famously declares God is dead, which means, like you kind of pointed out, the belief in God has become culturally irrelevant now. In that parable, the madman actually says, is not the greatness of this deed, the murder of God, too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? And Nietzsche is known for rejecting human equality. And I've read lots of Nietzsche scholars, and everybody agrees on it, basically. There's a very solid consensus. Yeah, he rejected human moral equality, but of course they tried to mitigate that, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't have democracy. We can grant legal equality and so on and so forth. We just give them equal access to things so they can have this fair play, fair competition between people. That's how they try to kind of merge our sort of liberal democratic sentiment and have preserved Nietzsche's ideas too. I just think it's way too optimistic a view of human beings. Given the first chance that we can, if we can dominate over somebody else, we will. And history has shown that over and over again. So I think it paints too rosy a picture. But yeah, I think once God is dead, human equality goes out the window. And the reason human equality goes out the window is because now the concept of being a human being is thrown into question. What is a human being?
Yeah.
We have no way of really answering that. And Nietzsche was famous for saying, without God, there's no such thing as being.
Right.
There's no being. Everything is becoming. Everything is in flux. There's nothing stable.
Interesting.
So even the idea of being a human being depends on, now it has to be achieved in some way. And through power, through whatever. And so there is no human equality to speak of, because human equality, that moral equality, requires something stable, some kind of fixed thing across all of humanity. But if God goes out the window, the death of God really brings in the death of the human. Yeah. And later thinkers who kind of followed Nietzsche picked up on it, like Michel Foucault was very clear about, this concept of man was an 18th century invention, right? And those kinds of things. And so death of God is a lot more radical than people think it is. And in fact, that's why Nietzsche wrote the madman parable. He wasn't speaking to Christians. He was speaking to other atheists who just didn't understand the implications of what they've done. And I'm not just saying atheists. It's like he's talking to that European, Christian European kind of culture that he was living in at the time. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think like what you just talked about there too, like this starts to erode the even creation order that we see, like that there is something exceptional about human identity and the distinction of being a human being that's separate from all other creation. And I'm struggling to remember the guy's name, but he's like the emeritus professor at Princeton. He's an Australian guy.
Peter Singer.
Peter Singer. Yeah, there you go. He starts to talk about now like sexuality with animals as being a justifiable, like completely moral experience. Like there would be nothing wrong with that. And to all our viewers, we don't normally go down that road, but here we are. You know what I mean? But this is really what starts to happen, right? There's no distinction now between the creation order, the separation between the image of God within humanity and that of the creation of all other animals and beasts of the earth, which God has made and is a beautiful thing and a good thing. But now that distinction, that separation is now eroded, which is quite concerning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even, there are legal cases in Canada too, where, certain bestial sex was, is not considered illegal. And those kinds of things. And I think there are some movements in that direction, which is very concerning to me. And yeah, when you remove that created order of things, when there are no boundaries and everything is becoming, there's no being, there's no stable substance underneath, all that kind of, that philosophical jargon, what it's pointing to is something very real, because if there's no difference between you and an animal, which Peter Singer would very much say, there's no moral difference. At the end of the day, what you come down to is this, right? Imagine you have two pieces of meat. You have beef on the one hand, chicken on the other, right? And you throw it into the same pan to cook it, well, whatever. It's just pieces of meat, right? That's what it comes down to. If you, for you to say, okay, humans, animals, there's no real distinction. You have to, in a sense, reduce them both to just pieces of meat. And I know this is a little bit crude, but even sex then becomes an act where you're just meshing two different pieces of meat together.
Right.
And that.
And why does it matter? Who gets to decide? Why?
Yeah.
Like, there's no boss. We just get to do what we feel. Yeah.
And with Peter Singer too, like I know he has very much this view of what makes you a person is that kind of ability to form self-interest, the self-awareness and self-interest. So much so that he goes so far to say then to something to the effect that a mature pig is more valuable than a toddler. But that is a kind of a natural consequence of the view that he holds.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas in the Christian worldview, there is a very clear order where you have God, you have the rest of creation, and then you have human beings in the middle somewhere where we're like God in some ways, but we're also like the rest of creation in a different way. And so there's that kind of 3-tier order. And whenever that's upset, there is all kinds of problems. So idolatry would be taking something in the rest of creation and putting or humans and then putting it over God, right? That's a problem. Or when you have bestial sex, then you're putting the rest of creation and humans on the same plane. That's
right.
Or if you are, and this could be an argument against even smoking marijuana recreationally, because when you're really high, then you're in a sense putting the rest of creation over humanity. Right. And so that can cause problems. And so that order and people think order is something that can be really restrictive. But what people don't appreciate is that those boundaries can actually give you more freedom
Absolutely.
to run wild than when everything is just open.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just listening to a pastor out of New York on a podcast yesterday, and he was talking about the dizziness of liberty and how he's like pastoring in New York, on the outside, all these people, it's like we have the Statue of Liberty and we're all embracing our freedom. And he's like, but when I interact with them as individuals, they are so lost trying to figure out who they are. And he said he heard someone say, we need a Statue of Liberty on one coast and the Statue of Responsibility on the other coast.
Yeah.
That would like hold us, and I just absolutely, it's like in the philosophical realm, okay, sure, these ideas you might like these ideas, but when you try to walk it out, and that's like the work that we do, it's like we're talking to the people who messed the order up.
Yeah.
And it messed them up, And so I think it doesn't work out in the field, And so I do feel hopeful that even as we are seeing these wild, like barbaric ideas kind of emerging, I do also see people kind of looking to the city on the hill and saying like, there's a light there. I want to get there. I want to find out if God is real. I want to, and then as they experience his presence and they experience the goodness, the truth, and the beauty of who God is, they're realizing like, I am way more than a piece of meat.
Yeah.
And God sees me that way. And there's a whole community that sees me that way. I think we're at a tough spot as a nation, but I do think that there's a lot of hope for some restoration.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate what you're saying. I think that's so true. Philosophers can come up with a lot of ideas, but reality is always the corrective, right? So, and we've seen, for example, in the 20th century, we had all kinds of these lofty ideas about communism.
Oh, yeah.
And communism has killed more people than any other economic system that we've seen thus far in such a concentrated manner too, in just the 20th century alone.
Right.
Tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of people killed in the outworking of that. And I think what we're seeing too with, for example, with the LGBTQ movement, or at least the certain sort of radical sort of activist kind of type manifestations of it, if you think back like 5 years or 10 years, you would have thought, okay, this is going to be the new normal. But we're already seeing people pushing back, saying, you know what, this is just not working. We have kids now who received certain surgeries and they've grown up and they're like, well, that was a stupid thing. Why didn't anybody protect me from all of this? And there is class action lawsuits going on. So all of that, in some ways, gives me a little bit of hope in the sense that hopefully people will see what is true, good, and beautiful and see them for what it is, so that we kind of push back against some of these philosophical ideas that are coming out of the academia that is just not viable, literally viable. I mean, viable in the sense of, the word literally has to connect with life, right? Viable. And it's just not leading to human flourishing. The question that I have on my mind is, how many lives have to be ruined before we come to our senses? That's the real question that I'm kind of wrestling with. But
I know. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Something that comes to mind too, and we do talk about this a lot, is this, because you talked about idolatry in kind of like flipping the creation order and elevating that above, taking something that's created and putting it above the creator. But I think in a similar way, even within the area of transgenderism, what we see is this disintegration of our design in body, soul, and spirit, and the elevation above those other, above body and spirit, the elevation of our soul and our inner perspective. Like, how do you see, because like that would be connected to like an old kind of perspective, philosophy of Gnosticism, right? That elevated that internal self devalued the physical self, saw it as a mistake, essentially. But how does transgenderism and Gnosticism and transhumanism kind of like all kind of have a similar source from it?
Yeah, all three of them basically have this thought that the body is secondary. The body is secondary to who you are. The Gnostics saw anything physical, anything material to be evil, and the spirit being pure and good, those kinds of things. So you're basically souls trapped in these meat prisons that are trying to escape. With the kinds of things that we see today, it's less about the body being evil, but the body being more something that you can just manipulate to your will and desire. And in an odd kind of a way, the transgender ideology puts the body subjected to your will almost completely, right? You can shape it however you want. And then in the transhumanist kind of literature, sometimes what you see is, for example, there is this one guy, Anders Sandberg, a Swedish philosopher, who pushes for what he calls morphological freedom. And he wants that as a kind of a constitutionally protected right. And what he means by morphological freedom is this idea that you should be able to shape your body and your physiology and your mind in whatever way you see fit. So that's where the word morph comes in, right? The form. Like, you should be able to take whatever form that you want. So an extreme bodily manifestation of that might be those extreme body modifications. Have you seen one of those?
Yeah.
Where a guy puts on these contact lenses and starts studs in his brows and slices his tongue so that he basically looks like a dragon, for example.
Right.
Covered in tattoos and those kinds of things. But according to morphological freedom, they'll say, he should be able to do that. Again, the idea is the same, that the body is secondary to who you are. And it has no sort of status of its own and is completely subjected to your will now. And you can shape it, form it however you want. You can do with it whatever you want. You are the master of your body. And you design its use however you see fit. Whereas the Christian worldview says, no, you were created for a purpose. Your body doesn't belong to you. Yes, it is your body, but it is something that is God-given. There is a purpose and design for it. And in a sense, you have to respect your body, right? And Christianity puts such a high, places such high value on the embodied existence.
Yeah.
So much so that God himself steps into humanity embodied, right? In the person of Jesus Christ, and pays the greatest compliment to humanity that he could have. He became one of us. So the body isn't just secondary to who we are, but it is, I have a hard time conceiving of myself as well. If I didn't have a body, if I was just a complete embodied soul, and if I'm meant to stay that way, is that really Steve Kim? Right? What does that even look like?
Right.
But there is that impulse. The body is secondary, and I just fundamentally disagree. With that. Yeah.
Totally.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about how Jesus, was incarnated into the human body, died a death in the human body, resurrected back to the human body, but the first fruit of resurrection, a glorified body. And I was like, wait, I wonder if the desire for the elevated human body is like a human desire for what we will experience as believers, in the glorified body. Like, I wonder if there's something in us that's like, I think that our bodies could be more. Like, I think death couldn't touch us. I just wonder if there's a way to think about that differently, to realize that,
almost like a misdirected desire for the resurrection.
Yeah. Thank you. That was like a nice succinct way to I was like, what am I trying to say?
Yeah. Imagine that Brian succinct something. My goodness.
But I do wonder if there's there's a hunger for a new thing. So then as Christians, we can offer the real, we can offer the pure under the submission of Christ. You will get a different body. Like it'll still be you, but it will, like Jesus was recognizable.
Yeah.
And he could walk through walls and eat, right? Yeah. Like that's wild. That's transhuman. That seems beyond our normal experience. I mean, even Philip was transported, translated. That's different, So maybe there's something there.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Sometimes in transhumanist literature, that gets brought up. So the idea is even Christians have some kind of a transhumanist kind of thing that's driving our view of what comes after death, sort of a thing. And in fact, that kind of a view even goes as far back as Francis Bacon. Like the guy was like, early modern period kind of guy, right? Using technology to improve human condition, that sort of a thing. So it's not that sort of a thinking is not in Christianity, but I think the basis for it would be very different. And I think that's kind of what you're touching at too, is what is the place of the body in terms of who we are? What is the design? Or is it just completely open to whatever we want to do with it? Because if we do have a design, then our flourishing is directly linked to living by that design.
Right.
I remember a number of years ago, it was around Christmas time, I delivered some food to my sister who lives here in town, some leftovers from Christmas dinner, and I delivered some of that to her because she couldn't join us for dinner that year. And on the way back, I was driving my wife's car, and I saw that I was running low on gas. So I pulled in, started pumping gas, and halfway through I stopped. I'm like, Steve, you idiot. She drives diesel.
Oh, no.
And so thankfully, my brother-in-law, he's very handy with cars. And so he helped me let's pump everything out, clear out the hoses and everything. Anyway, all that to say, imagine me taking a diesel car and trying to run it on gas. Everybody who knows anything about cars knows that's not good for that car, that it's going to destroy that car. It's the same thing whenever we try to live according to our own design rather than the design that has been given to us. I think it'll only lead to our destruction. And part of that design is that embodied existence. And there are certain boundaries, I think. And you can talk about, okay, what are those boundaries? What are some things we can do and cannot do? What are some things that are legit or not? Those are fair discussions, but just starting with this idea that the body is this infinitely malleable thing that is subject to our will, and we get to call the shots, that's just Genesis 3 all over again with respect to our body. Saying to God, no, you're not going to be the master of our destiny. We are going to be the masters of our own destiny. And it's that kind of committing high treason against the King of Kings all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well said.
Yeah. Well, Steve, what would you say? What's our hope? Somebody's listening and they're just knee deep in transhumanism ideology and all the views of the kind of world system of today. What's our hope? What would you want people to hear and to know in light of this conversation?
That is a very good question. What would I say? First thing I would say is this: your body is a good thing, right? Your body is not just secondary to who you are; it is a part of who you are. And Christianity puts a lot of stock in the fact that you have a body. And there are some things that are really good about transhumanism. the use of technology to alleviate suffering. I mean, that's what we do with medical technology and all those things, and there's a real place for that. So the question isn't so much whether we should enhance, but why? Why are we doing this in the first place?
Sure.
Is this other oriented, or is this about my selfish gain? And is this technology, what is this technology doing? So I think rather than asking, should we enhance ourselves? The question we should ask is why? Why should we enhance ourselves? Are we doing this like another Tower of Babel where we use technology to make gods out of ourselves? Or are we trying to restore relationship? Because technology can be used to restore and maintain relationship.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a real key question that we should raise. But I just want to start with that fundamental affirmation of you're designed by God and your body is part of that design. And when God created the physical world, he saw that it was good. He saw that the way he designed you, he saw that and he said it's good. In fact, after he created everything and saw everything working together, he said it's very good. And you're part of that world. So you don't have to try to prove yourself to go beyond being human. You're meant to be human. And in that, there is so much that you can there's so much of the true good and beautiful that you can experience through your embodied existence.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
Steve, we appreciate you so much, man. And we are so grateful too that like you guys are actively engaging in these topics and, trying to stay on the front lines of like cultural topics and challenging topics. And, you guys have had your conference every year, Apologetics Canada conference focused on, the theology of technology. And then this last year was Can I Trust the Bible? The previous year was Can I Trust the Bible? Now this year, the church in history. And could you guys tell us a little bit more, or could you tell us a little bit more about what Apologetics Canada is doing and how people can kind of stay in touch with the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So lots of things happening. We have our conferences coming up. We have our Western Youth Summit happening in May.
That's right.
So if you have high school kids, grade 9 to 12, definitely check that out. We have our first Alberta conference coming up in Calgary in October. But before
Let's
that,
go.
we have our Ontario conference, September 25th and 6th, I want to say,
Awesome.
in the GTA area. So there are lots of wonderful events coming up. We could really use your prayers as, like I said earlier, like we mentioned, we're growing, and that comes with a lot of challenges. And we have plans to do things in the U.S. as well, through our partnership with people in the United States. And we are Apologetics Canada, so we're going to focus on Canada, but we are developing some kind of a thing in the States so that they can take over what's happening in the U.S. So all of that requires lots of planning, lots of paperwork, lots of prayer, and we would covet your prayers in that way. Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. We're so grateful for you guys. We'll make sure we have a link to Apologetics Canada and some of your resources within the notes of this. Steve, thanks again for making time and for joining us here on the Union Podcast.
It was a wonderful pleasure. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in person again, hopefully soon.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Same here.